when you're broke, you're the most creative. And so like, even when I've got money in my pocket, how do you play entrepreneur? Entrepreneurs go out into the world, they find value, they take control of that value with very little of their own money and create something out of nothing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast. I am the leader, the chief executive officer, and the director of the 0 to 100 podcast. I'm Travis Dillard.
He does nothing. You do nothing. There's no directing.
And with me are my lower level associates, the Gabriel Hamill, who owns
Travis's ego is alive and well today, gets.
Gabriel Hamill owns $65 million in real estate. I own $66 million, I'm pretty sure. I'll look that up. And Mitch is Gabe's virtual assistant. He answers Gabe's telephone, manages his calendar. He's broadcasting live from the Midwest in Wisconsin. Gabe and I are in Oregon. And so just to give everybody a little backstory, 0 to 100 is all about scaling in real estate. 100 is just a number. It's about how do you buy real estate that generates passive income, passive being the operative word. You're not out fixing toilets, chasing ferrets. You're not building things. You're taking passive income, replaces all of your living and lifestyle expenses, and you can do whatever the hell you want. Real estate is the most leverageable asset on earth, and that's why we love it. It's the great equalizer in this country. It allows schmucks like us that come from nothing to achieve time, geography, and financial freedom. Time freedom being the new currency of the rich. And in the 0 to 100 podcast, we talk about scaling cash flow real estate. We're not talking about flips. We're not talking about land banking. We're not talking about Airbnbs or hotels, which maybe will come up in today's podcast. It's stuff that's truly passive. And we had a guest that was going to be on the call today. This is the second week I think we got stood up by our guests. So is it something Mitch did? I always wondered, is it something Mitch did?
That's what you wonder. Yeah, it could be.
They can't smell you.
So you mentioned not fixing toilets, and it made me think about that was in some ways the beginning of my ability to scale in real estate. I was attempting to fix a toilet in around 2000, 10, 11, something like that. I had been managing my own properties. I was horrible. Like, I'm not that skilled in construction, renovation, repair, maintenance. I am not.
What did you show up with for this toilet? Were you just like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. You show up with a zip tie.
100, right.
Duct tape.
Picture this. Yeah, duct tape goes a long way. Picture this. 100-year-old home. It was like right at 100 years. So this thing built 1912, 100-year-old home. And the upstairs tenant calls me because at the time I'm self-managing. This was actually the first seller finance property that I had done. It was those two duplexes side by side that I talk about. Upstairs unit and water's just pouring out. There's one water meter, so I have to turn off the water to both units. It ends up being like 10 o'clock at night by this time. And there's not a lot of space between the wall and the toilet. What is it called? A valve, right? And I'm like cranking the thing. My knuckles are bleeding. Like the thing won't come off. And it's 10 o'clock by this time. And my wife's home with the kids, like 2-year-old and newbornish. And I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, this is not why I got into real estate. But that was actually Travis mentioned toilet, and this vivid memory came to my mind. That was actually the turning point where I was like, I need to turn my properties over to property management. And I did shortly after that. And that actually gave me the ability to scale because I knew what I was good at. And what I was good at was building relationships, putting deals together, making creative offers. But I was not good at maintenance. I was not good at property management. And those bloody knuckles at 10 o'clock at night trying to fix a 100-year-old toilet, which I wasn't able to do. I had to call a plumber anyway. So I spent my time and my money and my energy when I could have been home just like taking it easy. But that pivotal moment really, really kind of lit the fire of like, hey, I need to hire property management. And then that year I put more deals together than I had previously done before.
I love that Gabe is not handy. He said this a few times before, because if you meet Gabe, you're like, he's like, oh, you would think he's like one of these Renaissance guys. Like, oh, of course he can go out and like whittle a wooden chair in his shop or fix a toilet or whatever the hell it is handy people do. Because I'm the same way. I'm like
whittle a wooden chair.
I'm the biggest dumbass when it comes to, I mean, I've tried stuff and you're right.
We're still trying to figure out what you're good at, Trav. There's just not.
So
it's fun. We keep looking. We just keep looking.
I got really lucky in life. So I have this thing where I have like this sort of like prepper mentality sometimes, especially right now where the world's at, like kind of in a scary world. I'm always like, okay, we're going to go like buy this land that you can't get to. You can only get to with an airplane. And like, it's going to be self-sufficient. We're going to get a community of people that are really smart. I'm just going off the rails here for a second. I'm like, okay, Mitch is going to be super valuable because he can fly. He's a pilot. Okay. My buddy Simon's he's an ER doc. So he can like, and his wife's a dentist. And this person's a great like gardener. And then my brother-in-law's a hunter. And I'm like, oh shit, they're all going to like, if shit hits the fan, they're going to kill me and eat me because
I'm going to eat you for sure.
I'm just an eater. I'm just a taker.
You're just food. You're like November, like or December. Yeah.
But to Gabe's point, that's actually served me well in life because I'm always like, when I build my business or you build your real estate portfolio, like crap, like you're forced to go hire like people and build systems and teams and hire people that are way smarter than you. And that's truly how you scale. Like when I grew my business, I purposely built a business that made me obsolete and made me useless in the business, right? So it was a sellable business and I do think that's really important. And I think, we always talk about the framework, like get in the game, learn how to buy your first deal, manage it, figure that out. But man, get out of management as fast as you can. Because there's always people that are way smarter and way better than you, especially in my case.
I also think the temptation, because I have a lot of friends that invest in real estate who, they have the skill set to be able to renovate anything and they can do it for less than, maybe a contractor could, but then they're trading their time for dollars. Now, some people love it, right? Like if you enjoy doing it, like I used to enjoy doing the demo. Like I would just tear shit apart. Like when I met my wife, she actually thought I was really handy because I like was renovating the house I lived in. I had like,
you show up with like your overalls and your gloves and
yeah,
like,
she didn't know that I got electrocuted multiple times because there's wire in the wall that I ripped out. Like that was like a few months before we met, right? My friends that have the skill set, it's actually harder for them to turn that over to property management because they're looking at it going, I can do this better or I can do this for less. But my question is always like, but what opportunities? Like you may be saving $1,000 here, but are you missing out on building $1 million of equity here? Are you building out on this cash flow property, putting more deals together because you're spending time digging a hole or putting on a roof or whatever it might be? So yeah, I'm grateful that I know enough to almost be dangerous, but not that much. But I'm not good enough to where most of these things I can do myself, and it just makes sense to hire good people to do the stuff I don't want to do and that I'm not great at.
Hey, what's your dollar per hour? I remember meeting with this entrepreneur and he was like $100 million guy. And he was like, what are you spending your time doing? It's all about time, man. It's all about what you spend your time doing. And I think it was him. He was like, are you mowing your own lawn? I'm like, well, of course. And he's like, okay, so if your neighbor goes, hey, I'll pay you $20 an hour to mow my lawn, are you going to do it? I'm like, no, that'd be a waste of time. He's like, well, then why are you a slave inside your own system? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like he just blew my mind. And now today, 10 years later, when you look at like finding good deals and you divide that by the hours, it can be in the several thousands of dollars per hour versus you're like fixing a toilet at 30, 40, $50 right. And so I think it comes down to like the most successful entrepreneurs, real estate investors have the same time as everybody else, but they spend it differently. They're not twiddling with, trying to fix something or going to a property or taking phone calls from people. They're actually like deal finding and they've got people for that.
Well, I think too, it's also like, I heard this interview with Jay. Do you guys know who Jay Papasan is? He's the co-author of The One Thing with Gary Keller. And I remember hearing an interview from him and he was like, there's things that I absolutely don't like to do. And there's other things I don't mind doing. And he was actually talking about mowing the lawn. He's like, he lives in Austin, and he's like, there is no, like, he's like, it was heavy to me. I hated it. Like, he's like, but I don't mind it. He's like, I don't mind folding the laundry. He's like, I don't mind doing that, you know? And so he's like, I'm not going to pay someone to do that, but he's like, I will absolutely, like, as soon as I could pay someone to do the yard work, I did it, because to him, that just felt like such a waste of time. And so it's kind of interesting. Like, I think the whole idea of time freedom or dollar productive activity is also like, what, not only like the time suck, but also like what feels heavy, what feels light to you. I mean, if you're spending time doing these little tasks that have very little return, but they feel light, then sure.
But it's cathartic. People say, "Oh, folding laundry is cathartic." I'd rather be kicked in the head by a horse than fold laundry. I
actually don't mind the lawn. My wife and I fight over that. Like, I have a guy that does the lawn, but every once in a while I'm like, nope, it's mine.
That's good to know.
And like,
Mitch,
it's great.
It's good to know.
I won't mow. I won't mow your lawn
when you're back in Oregon. I can save a lot of money by hiring.
I'm not
going
to mow 40 acres, Travis.
Right. Okay. So it's interesting though, this concept of time and looking, like Dan Martell talks about it and buy back your time. He's like, when you really look at like that and what's your time worth. Also, I think Kiyosaki was the first time I ever heard that concept. He uses the garbage, a similar thing to Gabe. Like, he's I'm going to save this much money I'm going to go out and buy the garbage disposal, and I'm going to try and install it. And then, most entrepreneurs, when it comes to stuff like that, are all dumbasses anyway. You ended up hiring the plumber anyway. And, it also comes down to opportunity costs. I think that's the key thing. Like my dad, we're all taught, like most of us are taught in industrial age education, get out there, do the work, be the guy, get it done, don't collaborate with people, like don't cheat, don't keep your eyes on your own paper. And so, my mom was a school teacher. My dad is a mill worker. I remember my dad would like, at first he's like, kind of like, son, are you lazy? You got guys out here mowing your lawn. Like, you can't go get a lawnmower and mow your own lawn. Like, there's, people look at that as being lazy, or you got people cleaning your house. When I explained it to him, I go, Dad, well, think about it. Like, what I do is at the time I'm building a company. That's what my skill set is. And I work hard. And on the weekends, I could be mowing the lawn all weekend, or I could be spending time with my kids. So opportunity cost can be seen in a lot of different lenses. It can be, I'm spending time doing something, which means I don't have time to do the other thing. Well, what's the other thing? It could be going out and finding 5 more deals that makes you $3 million in upside in the next 18 months and creates $20,000 a month in cash flow.
I actually think that's the big piece right there, Travis, what you just said. Like, is that thing you're doing, or those things you're doing, keeping you away? That opportunity cost, is it keeping you away from something that could produce a large amount of wealth or cash flow, right? And so,
or spending time with your family. That's an investment. Like, I could be investing in buying more properties, or I'm busy mowing my lawn because I'm a man and I'm Mitch England and I'm going to mow. I'm joking, Mitch, but I'm going to mow my lawn. And meanwhile, my kids are like, I'm not spending time with my kids. And that's an investment in, like, that's the most important investment. So if I'm doing the thing because I'm then I'm not going to spend time with my family.
I've missed my whole kid's childhood to mow that lawn, Travis, just to let you know. You need to be a more efficient lawnmower. It's one of those, it doesn't have an engine. It's one of the push ones and it spins. Yeah. Anyway.
All right. Let's get on track.
Well, investing in real estate is building businesses. Building businesses or investing. You're acquiring cash flow assets. You're buying businesses essentially. And I think we talk about this like on the cover of the book, I think, right? Time freedom is the new currency of the rich. And I think that's something that's unique to us. I think it is an important topic. I think a lot of people, they don't look at things through the lens of time. Mitch always uses this example. We were just talking about this on the School of Scale coaching call this morning, where we bought a property, 51 units, and we did what we call a lazy reposition, which means we added value to the property, right? But it wasn't like heavy lift stuff. It was like paving, or cleaning up junk, paving some roads, which we hired people to do, paint the laundry room, et cetera, et cetera. Pass utilities, $70. Raise rents 12 months later, $70. $140 times 51 pads. Equals X per month, equals X per year net operating income divided by a 6% cap rate. We increased the property $1.5 million. We did that, and we put about 20 of our own hours into that thing over 23 months. Whereas Mitch has a friend who was, I think, still waiting on permits to build a fourplex.
Yeah, it was years. It was like, well, I think he'd started building or whatever, but he's looking at us going, what did you do? and he's over here like roughing in his fourplex. Like, but that's a lot of work and a lot of attention and meeting with the city and yeah.
And if you want to truly scale in anything, business or real estate, I think you need to sit back and go, what are my tools and what can I connect together? Here's capital, right? I understand the deal. I'm going to connect deals and capital, or I need to find people that are going to help me find deals. I need to find people that are going to help me get lending, raise capital. It's really, you're a connector and you're putting things together, and that's the value you provide. And that's how you truly scale, as opposed to doing everything yourself. So we tied it back to that.
Well, I think when you think about the highest dollar per hour task, if you want to break it down, it's finding deals, it's finding great opportunities. Of course, you need the back end. You need to figure out how the capital side, you need to understand how to operate. There's the back end, sort of the execution side. But like, if you can focus on, it's also like, don't overcomplicate it, right? Because anybody can operate most people can operate a property and figure that piece out. But the deal is the rare piece. That's the hard piece. And it's not, we say finding deals, but really like, I think it's making deals. Like, how do you make deals? How do you look at things differently? How do you structure things differently? Gabe's been amazing in his journey with this, where it's like, instead of just looking at something and saying, that's not going to work. Like, well, how do you make it work? What if the seller carried, or what if you put a very low down payment down, or what? Like, we were looking at, Travis and I were looking at the deal the other day, and I was asking the question, like, well, what if we took a debt on this at like 7% IO from private lenders, which is low hard money, but we gave them an upside on the equity side, right? Which keeps our monthly really low as we reposition it, but then they get a bite on the equity. Like, just thinking outside the box, I think Gabe said it before, like, there's no standard terms. Like, everyone sort of like falls in place. They're like, oh, well, I got to put 20% down and it's over this AM and it's over this. It's like, no. Like, throw all that away. How do you look at deals, and instead of passing on it, dive into the profit loss, dive into the rent roll, go visit the property, talk to the seller, understand what they need, and then back into something that will work for everybody. And that's, I think, where a good investor can make a deal when a bad investor passes on that deal.
Yeah, I love the differentiating finding a deal versus making a deal, because I think a piece that gets overlooked a lot, and Mitch, you just touched on it, is how you finance the property. Like in almost every, how you finance, maybe every case, how you finance the property is literally what makes the deal work or not work. So whether it's traditional financing, private money, hard money, seller financing, some combination of bank finance, however you finance the property, that literally determines the terms of the loan. If you're getting a loan on the property, the terms of the loan, and whether or not that allows the property to cash flow or not. And it's interesting because terms are, like, I feel like, talked about very little in the real estate investing circle.
It's always the price. It's always, if you went really extreme and said, look, here's $1 million property and the seller wants $2 million, but they're going to finance it over 100 years and it's, 0% interest, and you got to make, what I'm trying to say is, like, you could take the extremes and literally the terms will still make it a good deal.
Yeah. How you finance the property determines whether it's a good deal or not.
Well, it's a question you ask yourself. It's like, I love that you said it earlier, Mitch. It's like, well, how can I? Like, how can I do this? I'd be curious. I'd be curious to go around the room. That's just the four of us here.
Just three, Trev. I don't know who you're talking to.
It's my invisible friend here.
I always say real estate investing takes really basic
It's the
math.
invisible guest that never showed up.
Real estate investing takes a really basic math. But Travis,
I'm like, I missed something because I have not been talking to another guy other than you.
Usually it's four. So the four of us, let's go around the room and talk about what was the most creative deal you did. And we'll let Gabe end because his is probably the best. What was the most creative deal that you've done, and what was the outcome? And let's start with out of the four, let's go with Mitch. Mitch, you're up.
Hey, look at that. So many options. So we've done, you and I have done a decent amount of creative deals, but I'll talk about there was an apartment complex in Washington that I think that was really interesting. This was in the very beginning of our journey together. I think we bought one property before this, but I found this property. It was 12 units, and I won't take forever because I could probably talk an hour about this, but basically it was off market. I go to the property and I was actually a real estate agent at the time trying to get listings because I'm like, I didn't have much money in my name. I'm trying to figure this out. So I go to the property and she's like, hey, I want to sell this 12 units. So I asked her, well, how much do you want to sell it for? She goes, I want to sell it for $400,000. Well, I know the market and I'm going, this seems like there's some value here. By the way, this is hell, but I'm literally looking at hell. I mean, it was a disaster. The tenants are a disaster. There's cops driving by all the time because they want to show force. Like there's people doing drug deals. It was a disaster.
There's bed bugs in that property.
Oh yeah, they literally the neighbor ran across the road and was like, "Don't go near this, you'll get bed." Anyway, and she
like,
was
sweet. We're like the
was,
guys running into the burning house. Let's do it.
I'm like, don't believe her. She was absolutely right. There were a lot of bed bugs there. She was very right. She didn't look right, but she was right.
She was right.
Yeah. And so anyway, there's this. I just read the book. Actually, we just read the book, Brian Murray's book. What is it? Crushing It, I think. And so I had like this framework in my head. I'm going, wait, like, what if we reposition this and new signage, the aesthetics, we made this better? And anyway, so I negotiated with her, $20,000 down, so not much, but we got in contract for $380,000. And we were in the beginning when Travis and I were investing at it, we didn't really have much money to our name. I mean, we'd shoveled into a property. Travis was reinvesting into his business. And so we were just going after these properties with like basically nothing.
I wasn't reinvesting my business. My business was anemic. It was spitting no cash flow off.
Oh,
that make it sound great, but yeah.
There you go. So we didn't really have much for down payment, but I think we had to come up with, basically the bank said, look, yeah, we see the value. We'll give you a construction loan of about $160 on top. We'll finance the whole deal, except for you need to come up with $70,000. So we had to go in $70,000 because I think it was like, 20% of the price and the construction. We, instead of coming up with that, we're like, well, we need to get the seller maybe to carry a second. Well, she was like, yeah, I'll do it. But the bank was like, we can't have a second on the property. So you remember what we did, Travis?
Oh yeah.
We put a second on Travis's home, which is great because it's no risk for me. I love those kind of deals. So anyway,
it's a great deal for Mitch.
We put a second on Travis's home.
It's probably because you had a second on your house, or a second, third, and a fourth on your house
already.
So I had to take the second. Yeah.
I was trying to live, man. So anyway, we cross collateralized, got into the deal, I think with under 20,000, or maybe it was right at 20,000, 10 apiece. Got control of this thing and we went to work. We, over the next like 6 months, made this property amazing, repositioned it, got the rents up, and all of a sudden the seller calls me. She goes, "Hey, I have 4 more units next door. I want to sell you." So we covered the price. I can't remember what it was, but it was a good price for the 4 units. We went back in the bank and the bank goes, "Look, because your NOI has improved so much, we'll just wrap into the whole thing and we'll pay the seller back basically 70 via the new debt." So we pull in the 4 more units for no more money out of pocket, right? The seller is now paid off. It's totally just debt on that one individual property. Fix up the 4 units. We had a little construction budget on the 4 units as well. I remember it was Christmas. I don't remember the year, but it was Christmas time frame because you and I got done with the renovation. We had like $40,000 left.
Didn't we turn one of the unit into like a 3-bedroom or something?
We did. We did one of the units of the 4. We added a bedroom for a little bit of value add. But I remember like it was Christmas time, didn't have a whole lot of money. And like I called the bank and I go, "Hey, we have $40,000 left in the account for renovations, but we're done with the renovations." They're like, "Oh, great. We'll just release it to you." So here, all of a sudden we get all of our own money back, a little Christmas bonus. We have control of 16 units. And like the whole time it was no more than 10,000 out of each one of our pockets, which I thought was pretty cool. It's what's amazing is, and I think Gabe said this before, when you're broke, you're the most creative. And so like, even when I've got money in my pocket, and Travis and I were just talking about this the other day, like, how do you play entrepreneur? Entrepreneurs go out into the world, they find value, they take control of that value with very little of their own money and create something out of nothing. And so I think that was a really good example of how we did that in the beginning to build our business.
It's also fun. Like, yeah, you have money in the bank. Gabe's like the king at this. We're going to go to Gabe next. I know he's thinking about his. I can't wait to hear his deal. But like, when you're like, that's my cash. I want to keep my cash. Like, how can I go put this thing together and create?
It can be a crutch too. It can be capital can be a crutch. And so, and then you all of a sudden get that block on that mindset where you're like, oh, I gotta, it's going to take this much for this. It's going to versus being like, look, I don't have capital to go to this, or I have very little. And I think it's, you look at the first 3 deals we did, that one was 10,000. The mobile home park was 7,000 a piece. The RV park was 50,000, so a little bit more money, but very little for the size of the asset. Like, we didn't put much money into the first 3 or 4 properties we bought, but they were great returns, great assets. So
Those 3 properties were the ones that got us to R1. Those 3 properties. And yeah. So Gabe, I bet Gabe probably doesn't have anything creative. Gabe's nothing.
Gabe's
He just
boring
goes
and
25% down, 25
nothing going on.
Vanilla, boring.
Nothing creative. Yeah. Nothing at all. I actually think the story you shared, Mitch, like it's the willingness to find a creative solution to a problem. And I think it's you're able to do what a lot of people aren't willing to do. And it's just simply to think outside the box. Like how can I make this deal work? How can I be in this deal with, little to no money out of pocket? And I think it starts with the willingness to think creatively. And yeah, I think for you guys, for me, like that started with not having money. So I was forced to be creative. So, I've done a lot of, it's interesting because I feel like I sometimes, I think of like creative financing. I used to think of that as only seller financing. I was anti-bank in the sense of purchases, where it was like, all right, I did a lot of these seller finance deals and then I would refinance them into long-term debt. But then when I think about, like, when you ask what's my most creative deal, and I feel like I've shared this one a lot lately, and I know I've shared this one with you, but I think about the industrial deal that I bought last year in Iowa City. And that was a combination of creativity, but also some bank financing and the willingness of the bank to be creative. And so I know you guys have heard this a lot, but it was a situation where it was a 34,000 square foot industrial deal in Iowa City. And what was interesting about the deal is they did a seller leaseback. So the owner of the property, the seller of the property, had built this thing in the mid 90s. Now fast forward to 2023, they own nothing on the property, but they wanted to recapitalize. So it's a 2-tenanted property, 35,000 square feet, and I was in contract for $2.9 million. The tenant, one was the tenant who was the seller. They had been there since the mid 90s. They had just signed a 5-year lease at closing. And the other tenant was the largest labeling packaging manufacturer in the world. Strong tenant. Oh, and the other tenant, that tenant that built it was the oldest commercial construction company in Iowa City. So 2 very strong tenants, but there was a little bit of risk because one of the tenants, the labeling packaging manufacturer, corporate didn't let them sign more than 1-year leases after their initial 10-year lease. So I was buying this thing with them just coming off the 10-year lease. And I thought there's some risk there that they could vacate after a year. And they're a strong tenant. They're paying above market rent to have these 1-year lease increments, but I wanted to mitigate that risk. So I was able to negotiate a $350,000 rent guarantee. But I'll tell you why that became valuable. Keep in mind, I'm in contract for this property at $2.9 million. And the bank was willing to finance 80% of the loan. Well, the broker was willing to finance 10% of the loan. So now this thing's 90% loan to value, but the cash flow is really good. So $2.9 million, I'm bringing in 10%, that's $300,000, but I have a $350,000 rent guarantee that I would get at closing. And normally that would be escrowed. But what the bank said at closing or prior to closing was, we don't need all that money. We'll actually give you $150,000 back. So here's what actually happened. I pay $2.9 million. I give a $300,000 check at closing. They hand me $150,000 back. So I'm into this thing 5% down. But it actually gets better because there's still $200,000 left from that rent guarantee. And normally that would be escrowed. And normally that'd be escrowed and released if that tenant vacated or if that tenant were willing to sign a longer lease. But what happened is that bank said, we don't need to escrow that money. We would like to have deposits at our bank. You can put it in a checking, a savings, or a CD. So what ended up happening is I'm in this thing 5% down. Year 1 cash on cash is 60%. Year 2 cash on cash with once the rent increase hits in was going to be 72% cash on cash, but it actually got better. That $200,000 sat in a CD, earned interest for about a year and a half. And then that tenant actually signed a 2-year lease. And because they signed that 2-year lease, the bank actually released that $200,000 back to me. So in a year and a half, this property now, I'm no money out of pocket. I actually made $50,000. It cash flows about $120,000 a year, and I'm no money out of pocket. And that was a willingness to myself, the seller, the broker, and the bank all willing to get creative because the property was a It was a great property in a great area with strong tenants and strong cash flow.
And I've been asking Gabe to get another deal like that under contract that I can invest with him, and he's yet to do it.
I've been trying to replicate this as well. I mean, and it's, I know you guys have heard this deal multiple times, but I think it illustrates like the willingness to be creative, but also to mitigate risk. There's a lot of deals where it's like, it looks good, but there's some risk aspect to it. And in this case, it was like, hey, two strong tenants, but one of these tenants are on a 1-year lease. How do I mitigate that risk and make it go from a good deal to a great deal and mitigate the risk of when that tenant moves out? Now, thankfully, their largest client is right down the street and they want to be there. So even though corporate doesn't usually allow them to sign 1-year leases, they were willing to sign a 2-year lease. And that was enough for the bank to say, hey, you know what? They're sticking around for a while. We'll release that money back to you. And so it's like, and even if they hadn't, I was still 5% into that deal, and year 2 would have been about a 72% cash on cash return, which is, in my books is a pretty decent cash on cash return.
Yeah, we try to do 75%, Gabe, but 72 is okay. Yeah.
Was it only 72?
It's not bad.
Now it's over. Ugh, that's embarrassing for you.
Now it's an infinite return, right? And I think it opened my eyes to the, I used to think creative financing, because of my background, meant all seller financing. But there's also ways you can combine seller financing, private money, hard money. You can combine all these different strategies to make the financing creative, and it doesn't have to only not involve banks.
Especially with commercial lending. Like, I think a lot of people forget that. And I'll let Mitch chime in here in a second, but like, I think a lot of people think like it's like when they buy their house, like just some negotiating, but it's like, this is the rate. It's 30 years. You're going to put this much down. It is what it is. But like when you get into commercial lending, like it's kind of the Wild West in a lot of cases. Like every bank has a different appetite, different asset class appetites, and everything is negotiable. Like, and I think people forget that. And I'm going to get into another creative deal that I've done. But I think the common points here is, number one, you ask the question instead of saying I can't, how can I? Number two, like both of these examples, and including the example I'm about ready to give, is people forget about second position loans, right? Like you can have a seller carry back a second. Oh, but then I remember when the bank that we were working with, Mitch, originally allowed second positions, but then they stopped doing it. Find another bank that will allow a second position, or do a separate deal on the side under the seller, but cross collateralize a deal. I don't know if that's legal. Make sure you check with your loan covenants, attorney, blah, blah, blah. But like Gabe said, you can mix and match different types of lending types to make a deal work. Also always ask. A lot of people just don't ask. They're like, why not ask the seller to come down on the price? Why not ask the seller to carry back a second? Why not ask the seller to, offer a credit at closing for rehab funds? Why not ask the bank?
I asked the seller once. The deal didn't end up going through. It's a long story, but I asked for like every single thing in their house, including a Toyota Tacoma truck. They had said yes to everything except for the truck and like 1 or 2 pieces of artwork they had in the house. But I liked the way, I don't know if it was like staged or it was their stuff, but like I liked everything in it. They had agreed. I'm like, I'm going to ask for everything. I actually mostly just wanted the truck at the time, but they actually said yes to everything except for the truck. So it's like you literally can ask for anything.
Well, people forget. What's the worst they're going to say? No, and ask the bank again. Ask the bank. Can you do better? Can you do this? Will you allow a second? Sometimes the bank will allow a second, but they just want to make sure that the debt hurdle, when you combine the first and the second loan, clears like a 1.25 or a 1.30 debt hurdle. If you don't know that, go join School of Scale at 0 to 100, and you're going to learn all about these terms. But I think the last thing too is sometimes it takes multiple parties to make a deal creative, right? The lenders can jump in and be creative. The seller can be creative. You can be creative. And that's kind of a textbook example of Gabe's deal. Is like, I think you had the broker was carrying back a second, right? Sometimes the broker will maybe reduce their commission for an equity position. I've heard of that before. The bank was allowing the broker to carry back a second, and the bank was allowing you to come in with, X% down if you deposited money in their CD. So again, multiple parties, always ask, think about second positions. But again, I love that you said creative financing isn't just like seller carry, because a lot of people think that's the case.
Well, I think sometimes it's de-risking the situation, right? Like I look at those early seller finance deals where I put no money down, but they were cash flow positive, I felt like I de-risked myself because worst case scenario, they cash flow from day one, but I have no money out of pocket. Or if the same deal, I risk, say, $100,000, which at the time, in those early days, I didn't have. Now I'm risking that capital for a much lower return, right? And so if you're putting that money down, now you have to calculate, well, what's my true cash on cash? Because I'm risking that amount of money. And so it's always, I also think of creative financing as how can I de-risk the financing or de-risk myself as much as possible.
I love that. The other thing I learned from our last transaction is like, don't stop like a lot of people will ask these questions up front. They'll ask for good seller finance or they'll ask for different, whether it's the bank or the seller or whoever, but like ask during the transaction because things change as well. So like our last transaction, we went in actually going with bank debt, but we changed to seller finance. Even though she had said no 3 or 4 times in the beginning, I had earned more trust with her during the transaction and she switched it and said, yeah, let's do seller finance. So we have a deal right now we're chasing. I've asked him 5 times so far if he would seller finance, including giving him different options to seller finance. He said no the entire time. I think I'll get him to seller finance. We're going to go into contract and I'm going to make sure to build my relationship with him and I'll ask him in another couple weeks. And I'm not asking him in a rude way. I always say, hey, I know you don't want to do this, but I was thinking outside the box on this one. What if we did this and this and this? And what if I tossed another 20,000 at you actually on top and we did this and this and we went sell? Like I would rather work with a seller and pay them a little more than work with any bank in the world, in my opinion. I think it's the best debt in the world. It's non-recourse and it's easy, but like realize like you can ask in the middle of the transaction. And the other thing too is when you're renegotiating, say you find a problem or you find things that need to be fixed or whatever that is, you want to renegotiate, like get out of the headspace that you have to renegotiate a price. Why not renegotiate up terms, especially on a seller finance? Maybe you bring the percent down a point or you stretch the term out a year or 2. Like terms make the deal. And so renegotiate on terms and asking multiple times makes the deal.
Also, that made me think, Mitch, not only can you renegotiate terms prior to closing, you can renegotiate terms after you close. So I had some of these early seller finance deals where a balloon was coming up and I simply asked the seller if they would extend and they said, sure. And I've had sellers where then they've asked me to extend. They're like, hey, we don't, looks like a balloon's coming up. We don't actually want to be paid off. So I've had seller carried financing where we've actually dropped the interest rate and extended the balloon. And I've also had, other ones where we bump up the interest rate because it's like thanking them for extending. But just because there's a balloon due doesn't mean you can't renegotiate those terms after you close on the deal.
That's a great point, Mitch. Because we got a private note on a portfolio in Florida that's coming up. Florida's interesting, by the way. Just dodged like 2 hurricanes. This 60 lots. There's a couple homes, but it's like
on the east side. No.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this, Mitch. That giving our listeners insight into some of the crazy world and how we think about this stuff. We've gone back to him and asked him if he wants to extend, but we haven't offered anything up. We're like, do you just want to extend? It's a 4% loan, 25-year AM. We should go back to him and say, hey, how about this? How about we'll give you 5% or 5.5%? You extend it for 2 more years, 3 more years, and we'll give you some points. Maybe we'll throw 20, 30, 40. We've added millions in equity on this property. We could do that. And if we're going to go to a bank, we're going to be paying points anyway.
I like to just ask if they're willing to extend for a couple of years and see what they come back with. Because I've had similar situation where it was seller finance, low interest. And I said, hey, are you willing to extend the loan a couple more years? And sometimes it's yes, and they want nothing else. So there's no points, no interest rate. And other times, the note holder says, yeah, I'm willing to extend for a couple of years, but I need to bump up the interest rate a 0.5 point or 1%. I think I don't want to say risky, but don't offer too much. Like, I'll give you a couple points and too higher, interest rate up. Sometimes they just come back and say, yeah, sure, no problem. Or I'll extend.
Well, we had our asset manager ask, what we need to do is sick Mitch, the Chinese water torture. Like Mitch is the Chinese water torture. I know how Mitch operates, and he'll just wear nice. He's nice. Look at him. The nicest guy is like a cuddly teddy bear, but he's like secretly, he's like just dripping on him. Like, fine. Yes. Damn it. I will give you
I do like to ask multiple times. I think people just give up too early. And so I'm negotiating a deal right now and I've literally asked him 4 or 5 times And it's always the night, the next ask, I was thinking about putting together sort of a cost benefit analysis of what's going to look like to, as far as taxes go for him, and just let him know, hey, I was thinking about you out the other end. I know you'll probably have to pay a lot of taxes on this, but if we were to sell our finance, it would look like this. And so again, he's not mad at me. We're building a good relationship.
And something you do that you're really good at, and this is a sales tactic. Mitch is really good at this, and he taught me this, and I've learned it. I have learned this by the way, if you're in the business, you got to learn sales. You're selling a seller on finance terms, you're selling a bank on you, but Mitch acknowledges, hey, look, I know before you said you weren't interested. Because if you just ask and didn't acknowledge that, I think that would piss people off. But look, I know you said you weren't interested, and I totally respect that. However, and it doesn't seem like the Chinese water torture. It's secret. It's secret Chinese water torture. So it's good for you, man. I love that.
I also think though on that topic, a lot of these sellers, they carry financing for a couple of years. They think they want a balloon. They think they want to be paid off, but they get very used to getting that check in the mail every month. And they realize I'd rather have the consistency of that check every month than that lump sum of cash. Now, sometimes circumstances change and they want to be paid off, but a lot of times you have someone carry financing for say 3, 4, 5 years, and then all of a sudden they're going to get a lump sum of cash. They don't know what to do with it. They'd rather actually continue to get the income.
Well, it's a new problem.
Yeah, they start thinking about how am I going to deploy that? I'm only going to get 4.5% in a money market. I'm going to have to pay capital gains. You start saying, so Mitch, and I'm serious about this, we need to stick you on Dan. Release the Mitch on Dan the seller in Florida to talk about owner carry, extending the owner carry.
And I won't even charge you guys any kind of commission on giving you such a great idea.
Well, I had this conversation with Travis a couple months ago, but Travis has early onset memory loss, so we have to talk about it multiple times.
Should we ask Dan? And you're right. I was very shame on me. I'm like, we've asked Dan. Amanda's asked Dan, and I'm man, our asset manager, I love her. She's awesome. And she's like, hey Dan, do you want to extend the note? No. Okay, but it's like you and I should get on a call, or maybe you should fly down there, Mitch. You know what? Who not how? Fly down there, negotiate with Dan, get this thing extended.
Yeah, we'll get it done.
Well, the other thing on that one too, by the way, we force appreciated that property so much. We're about under 50% levered on that. So one of the reasons we might go with a portfolio loan or some institutional financing is to get some cash back out, which we can then return back to our investors, and they can reinvest the velocity of capital, yada yada. So, can I talk about a creative deal that happened? Or
I think we're out of time, buddy.
Sorry, Travis.
Yeah, we just ran out of time. We'll get to you next time, though.
Mitch, you have any other creative deals you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, actually, I think I do have time for one more.
Like, I'm gonna stand you guys up next week.
Travis wants to talk so bad.
All right, Travis.
Can I just start?
All right. Let's hear what you got.
We love the sound of your voice, Trav.
Well, so it is interesting. There's a better deal that Mitch and I have done, but just as a side note, there was a deal I was buying it, and I own my business. I bought an office building. I had to convert it to an office building. I forget it was like a clinic. It was a pediatric clinic or something. And there's a bunch of TI. And I remember just like laying awake and going, how am I I don't have the cash to put down on this. And I talked to the bank and asked them if the seller could carry a second. And they said, yes. So that's a big one. This one I'm going to talk about, though, is it's a mobile home park that Mitch and I bought in North Carolina. I'll just talk about the high level structure. It's kind of a backstory to it. We actually got out there and we were like, screw this seller. This is this out of state guy, which we're out of state. That's fine. But he was sucking all the cash out of this property, was putting nothing back into it. Sewers overflowing. There's abandoned homes, trees falling down. And it was not as advertised, right?
You bought one of my properties?
No, this guy's from California.
I've been looking for you.
You son of a bitch. You asshole. No. So we got out there and we called this the wholesalers, and we're like, yeah, tell the seller to pound sand. We're not buying this thing. We're not, like, he marketed this as X. It's certainly not X. And by the way, these poor tenants are living in hell, and it's his fault. And so long story short, I think on this deal, we had a private money lender that came in and was doing, that we're buying the park because it wasn't really financeable in the condition it was.
We literally said no to this park. We told the wholesaler. And then I remember we were driving back to the hotel to grab a bite to eat. And we're like, let's just run numbers and figure out what we would pay.
Right.
Just for the hell of it. I mean, this was like,
or structure.
Hail Mary.
What did the structure look like? Yeah.
Yeah. Number structure. But we were absolutely 100% out. but we came up over an hour. So we came up with this like terms and price, and I'll let you go with the rest.
We bought it for 1.1 million. We had a private money lender that was we told the seller the only way we'll do this is if you lower the price $400,000, because it was listed for 1.5. See, I can do math, Mitch. 1.5 minus 400,000 is 1.1. $1.1 million purchase price, but there was going to be, we calculated there was probably going to be about $400,000 in CapEx is kind of what we're thinking, right?
400.
Yeah. And so we had the private money lender. No. I was the private money lender on that one, actually. I think on that one, we had the seller carry back. He wanted to be we said, you can be in first position, but you got to lower the price $400,000. And he gave us really great terms. I think it was like interest only. It was like really low interest, really, really low interest. And I knew what we had. So I was like, okay, I'll take a second position. I'll come in as the second lender, which included the CapEx to do the deal. And we ended up only spending $300,000 on the CapEx, right? So we were all in on this thing, $1.4 million. And then we executed our value add plan, which is like cleaning up the homes, trimming the trees, fixing the sewer issues, the drainage issues. Like it was a great park. We did some infill. That park now is worth, what is that thing worth? We just ran this again, we were all in for 1.4 million.
I think we're between like 3.1 and 3.3, somewhere in there now.
Yeah, I was thinking 3.2. So we bought it for what we were all in for 1.3. It's now worth over $3 million. And so that's, again, we were able to get into it with some creative financing. So there you go. There's my deal.
But those kind of deals that I love that. And honestly, guys, like when we walked this park, we had tenants just about breaking down and crying because they're like, I want to stay here. I have family here, all these things, but I have literally sewer. They weren't going to the bathroom in their home anymore because they had the sewer lines were backing up. The culverts were all overflowing. It was dangerous. There were homes that the kids would go play in. They had big dirt and left there. There was, I think, 2 or 3 like felons in the park that end up causing problems later on. You work with the police department to get them out. Like we turned this into a really cool story. Now every time we sell a home in there, we give the local church $1,000 because, that's kind of the core of the community. We want to make sure we're supporting the community. Like we literally got a letter from I think it was one of the UPS drivers or something, like sent us a letter and was like, hey, like whatever you guys did here, thank you so much.
Postal lady. She's like,
the postal lady, because she's like, I can actually go there and I feel like I can drop off mail without like, we talk a lot about the numbers, but also just the impact on the community that we were able to make. And by the way, we made this in Hood River, Oregon, in our office. We were pulling strings and working with contractors and changing tenants' lives. And so I think that's the beauty of real estate. It's like we're able to make people's lives better, make them safer, but we also benefit financially. And it's just a win-win-win. Like that community I feel like is like a staple for
it is a cash cow too.
Yeah.
It is a cash
and
cow.
It is. It's a great park.
Right. Our investors have done really, really well on that property. We've done really, really well. It's been fantastic. And I love that you do mention the community. Like we've improved the community. And that's really what we're doing, right? As investors. First of all, I wouldn't recommend a park like this for new investors, right? This is a heavy lift. We have the right team to do it. But like, yeah, everybody can win in real estate. The tenants can win, the community can win, the seller can win, the buyer can win, the lenders can win, everybody can win. And that's, in my mind, that's when business deals make the most sense. And that's when they have the least amount of friction. And they when you knock it out of the park is like literally when everybody wins on those deals.
You did it in 6 minutes too. I thought we were going to be an hour late.
I had it. You guys you wouldn't stop talking about your deals, and I had 6 minutes.
I think actually you talked more when we were presenting our deals than we talked.
Yeah, because I have great insight. I'm the chairman of the podcast. I have to keep it going.
Anyway, let's wrap it up there.
Isn't it maybe like, oh, we're getting stood up. Let's talk real estate. An hour later, here we go. Hopefully, people got value out of that. So, anything else? Any wise words from Gabe and Mitch? Mostly Gabe. Before we get out of here.
Don't forget to buy some real estate. No, I'm excited to kind of take this conversation offline and go deeper with our elites. I think there's a lot of opportunities to get creative in this market, really in all markets. And I think it's more the mindset of, thinking outside of the box, being willing to think creative, finding a problem and being willing to find a solution to that problem. I mean, It's always a great time to buy real estate. If you buy right, it's always a great market. There's opportunities everywhere if you're paying attention and willing to solve problems and get creative.
I love that. And guys, don't forget, if you like, these podcasts, you want to be a part of our world, go to 0100pod.com. That's 100pod.com. You can grab a free copy of our book there, as well as learn more about School Scale, about our mastermind Elite. And we'd love to connect with you.
Get out there, buy some real estate. Deals are, especially now, deals are surfacing. So thanks, Gabe. Thanks, Mitch. Love you guys. Appreciate you all. Thanks to all of our listeners. And we'll talk to you next week.